everyone, this is Mrs. Haar. Welcome to our live session, which is being recorded this week due to your day off for Martin Luther King Day. So just watch this and upload your MHTA or Mrs. Haar's takeaway into the Dropbox that I'll give you at the end of the session, and you'll be good to go. And then I'll see you guys all online on Tuesday. So let's begin here. So this week we had the following items due: your vocabulary assignment, your weather assignment, your latitude and longitude assignment, quiz 1, your MHTA, which I'm giving you today, and your unit 1 exam. That covers week 1 and week 2. So make sure you review your materials before you go ahead and take this 50-point exam, which covers all of last week's material as well as this week's material. Remember, everything is due Tuesday night at midnight, because on Wednesday we start our next week and we're moving to our continents. For the rest of the course, we will be going continent by continent and focused on that area and the different aspects, not only the layout and the different countries, but the people and their lifestyles in that area. So we talked a little bit about weather and climate, and I want you guys just to really remember that climate is over a long period. That's what it tends to be like over a long time aspect, and that's what we kind of look at for an area. What's their normal climate? Now, weather can change day to day. What we hear in the news and what we talk about usually with everyone when we're planning things to do is what's happening with the weather. You know, right now in Colorado, we're about to experience some really, really warm weather, unseasonably warm for this coming week. So that's our weather, and that's what we discussed. But the climate is what it normally is, the general temperature and norms in that area. So make sure you understand the difference between weather and climate. And so then we kind of talked about why is it cold in winter and warm in summer. And if you ask most people this, and this would be a great dinner conversation with your family, is kind of throw that out there. Ask them why it's cold in the winter and warm in the summer. And if you ask most people why it's cold in the winter and warm in the summer, the response is usually that the earth must be closer to the sun in the summer and further away in the winter, right? Makes sense? After all, this phenomena is in line with what we experience in our everyday lives. But think about it as, and it makes sense to people because when they think about moving closer to like a fireplace, especially when it's cold in the winter here, we want to move close to the fireplace. We think getting closer to the heat would make you get warmer. While this does make sense on a lot of levels, it really doesn't tell the whole story. The reason that it's cold in the winter and warm in the summer is most easily identified by remembering one key fact about the Earth, and that is when it is the summer in the northern hemisphere, it's winter in the southern hemisphere and vice versa. So the reason for these different seasons is solely due to the proximity to the sun. But if it was just that, then it should be warm in both the northern and southern hemispheres at the same time. Another another big key factor is involved in that. And what that is, it's the matter of the tilt. So the biggest reason for the seasons, even though it does make sense fundamentally that when you're closer to the sun, you're warmer, and that is a piece of it, but the biggest reason is the matter of the tilt. That's the answer to why it's cold in the winter and warm in the summer. Really, the main answer is the matter of the tilt. The biggest reasons for the seasons is that the Earth's axis is tilted. So when the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, summer is experienced on Earth, while during the same time the southern hemisphere gets less light over that area of the planet, so winter occurs. So it really has to do with the tilt in relation to proximity to the sun, but the tilt really plays the biggest key factor in that. So keep in mind that the tilt, the Earth's tilt, really plays big into our seasons and why it's cold in the winter and warm in the summer. So another thing we talked about this week that I really want you to understand, and more than anything, you probably saw that when you were looking and working on, your placements and figuring out latitude and longitude. You probably saw on most of the maps that you looked at this thing called a compass rose. And the compass rose, back, especially when you watch any kind of pirate movies and they bring out the map, you always see this huge compass rose. Well, basically with this compass rose, and it still is traditionally shown in some aspect on all maps, even the Robinson, all different maps used today. Usually at some point in the map, they're going to have something that signifies north, south, east, west. And those are the 4 cardinal directions. And so the traditional compass rose that they used to use back when maps, they relied completely on maps and we didn't have our wonderful navigation systems in place, they had this compass rose that incorporated not only the 4 cardinal directions, which are north, south, east, and west, but the 4 intermediate directs. And that you can see shown here, where it shows northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. So they show all the different components. So it's not just north, south, east, and west. So that is what a compass rose. So if you're ever asked what a compass rose is, you'll know that it shows north, south, east, west. It shows the 4 cardinal directions. And the deluxe compass rose show the 4 intermediate directs, which breaks it up to like northeast or northwest. So that is the compass rose for you. We covered quite a bit this week is the latitude and longitude. Understand where everything lies, and I know you guys had kind of an understanding or a knowledge of the latitude and longitude, but the reason it's so important we understand is because we talk about locations quite a bit, and when we're talking about latitude or parallels or longitude or meridians, and keep in mind where the prime meridian is, that could be a test question, so make sure you guys all know where that is. But when we're talking about that, really the reason we don't want to understand that is we want to know location. So there's 2 different types of location, and this is one of your major themes of geography. The 5 themes, remember we talked about, well, one is location. We talk about absolute locations, and basically absolute location is where is place, and one way to answer that is by describing the absolute location. It's its position on the globe, and that's why we bring in that latitude and longitude. There's several ways to describe a place's absolute location, but the most common way is to draw like an imaginary line around the Earth. The equator is one such line. It circles the globe halfway between the north and south poles. You all know this. The equator divides the world into 2 halves or hemispheres. All land and water between the equator and the northern pole, or North Pole, is located in the northern hemisphere. The southern hemisphere includes half the Earth between the equator and the South Pole. Now remember, those imaginary lines that run parallel to the Earth, to the equator, are lines of latitude, known as the parallels. They measure distances north or south of the equator. The equator is designated as 0 degrees, while the poles are 90 degrees north and 90 degrees south. Now remember, because the Earth's tilt is 23.5 as it revolves around the sun, the Tropic of Cancer at 23.5 degrees north and the Tropic of Capricorn at 23.5 degrees south mark the boundaries of the places on the Earth that receive the most, now keep in mind, the most direct sunlight and the greatest heat energy from the sun. So remember, this is key that you guys remember, that the Earth tilt is about 23.5 degrees as it revolves around the sun, and the Tropic of Cancer at 23.5 degrees north and the Tropic of Capricorn 23.5 south mark the boundaries of the places on the Earth that receive the most direct sunlight and therefore the greatest heat energy from the sun. So be aware of that when we're talking about latitude. Now the other set of imaginary lines are the lines of longitude, or the meridians, which run north and south between the 2 poles. The prime meridian at 0 degrees, you all know, is in England at the Royal Observatory. Could be a test question. Other meridians are measured in degrees from 0 to 180 east or west from that prime meridian. Unlike the lines of latitude, meridians are not parallel to each other. The grid lines formed by latitude and longitude allows all places on Earth to be described by coordinates. For example, Chicago, Illinois, 42 degrees north and 88 degrees west. So that would be Chicago's absolute location. That's when we're talking about absolute location, we're talking about when we use our latitude and longitude to go ahead and come up with these coordinates, like Chicago at 42 degrees north and 88 degrees west. That is when we say, okay, Chicago's absolute location on our earth, that is it. So we can find that, pinpoint that where it is. Now the difference between that and, so that's absolute location. The other piece is relative location. Another way that we sometimes will describe where something is, we'll say the relative location. So we talked about absolute. That's when we describe exactly where that is located on the globe. Then the relative location is where we go ahead and we describe how it's located to other places. For example, Chicago that we were just talking about. It can be described as being in the northeastern Illinois along the southwestern shore of Lake Michigan, just south of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So that's where it is relative to other things. Relative locations change over time, as do ways that places relate to one another. One important locational characteristic of modern Chicago is that it can be reached within half a day from all airports in the United States. Now that could change if different airports got developed or changed. So that's why relative locations can change. Let's say they put in an airport, let's say, or they remove some airports from that area, then all of a sudden that would change its relative location, where we could say it can be reached within a half a day from all airports. It no longer is that case. So that's why relative location can change. Absolute does not change. Those coordinates are always the same. And so absolute location, if we want to know exactly where something is on our planet, we grab those coordinates and we say right here, that doesn't change. Relative location, that can change depending on developments and how things change in the way things are laid out in our country or in neighboring states. Be aware, because there could be a test question on absolute and relative location, all right? So, and then the other thing I want you to walk away from is place. Every place on the earth has a collection of features that are distinguished from other places. Geographers know that similar physical or human characteristics are found in many different places. So what we're going to start looking at as we talk about place and we move forward, we're going to be looking at place by moving from continent to continent. We're going to look at the physical characteristics and human characteristics of each continent. So we're going to be moving away from that general theme of location. We're going to have an idea of where the different countries on continents are located. We're not going to necessarily ask you guys to know the exact location. We're not going to ask you to the absolute location to give us the where that falls, but we are going to want to know the relative location of the countries to each other on different continents as we move in and discover and explore our different continents. So that is location. Make sure you understand relative and absolute location. So the MHTA, you're going to send me an example or the difference. First of all, you're going to let me know what's the difference between absolute and relative location, and we just covered that, and give me an example. Let's say we'll just use Chicago just like we did. You don't have to give me all the coordinates, but let me know which one is which for absolute and relative, and kind of give me an example. You can use Chicago or anything else. So send me an example, define absolute and relative in a short little quick summary, doesn't have to be anything fancy, and then give me an example of talking about a place. You could use Denver and tell me how, when we describe Denver, how we would describe its absolute location or its relative location, or you can use Chicago, the example we already used. That's your MHTA. When I say send it to me, you're not going to actually email it to me. You're going to upload it into your Dropbox. So upload that into your Dropbox for this week. Let me know if you have any questions. Once again, it's giving me an example and kind of defining absolute and relative location. So you're going to be done for this week if you've done all of the things listed below by Tuesday night, and Wednesday we start our next unit, and we're going to be moving into Africa. So we're going to be moving into the place of Africa. We're going to talk about the physical characteristics, the natural features of the place, including landforms, climate, vegetation, and really looking when we get to Africa, we're